All right, good morning, everyone. Look at this, a full house. This is incredible. All right, fantastic. So, my name's Mark Beatty, and I'm from Washington State University, the Everett campus. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce this morning's Session 2A, panel presentation in the Strengthening Communities track. If you've not already done so, please silence your devices now. Okay, this is a 60-minute panel session. The last 10 to 15 minutes will be reserved for questions and answers. And Genevieve is our wonderful timekeeper for today. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce and now present the panelists. And as fate would have it, we were dinner mates last night. So I woke up this morning and I got the message from Angela, this is who you're going to introduce. I said, I know these people. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. So all from the Minnesota area, we've got Sharon Powell from University of Minnesota Extension, Tonia Brinston from SLAP, sounds like a planned financial company, LLC, and Manu Lewis, ManUcan, LLC, as well. So fantastic. Without further ado, please take it away.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with all of you today. I'm going to be the clicker, so I'm standing up. But again, I'm Sharon Powell. I'm an educator in the Center for Family Development at U of M Extension. And Tonia is actually my coworker. She also works for U of M Extension, but I don't know why that didn't get put on the stuff. But anyway, so we're going to talk to you about a research project that Tonia developed and that Manu consulted with us on, called Voices of the Future. Take it away. There we go.
This is you.
That's me again? Okay. So as I just said, this project was a collaboration between the university and the community. And it really began with another community partnership, which is where Tonia and I became friends. And that was a program that I was working on as an extension educator and that Tonia was working on as a consultant in the community. And over time, Tonia was like, I want to get in on some research grants. I'm really interested in that. Let me know when something comes up that might be suitable for us. And I was like, okay, I'll be looking. And as luck would have it, in the summer of 2020, this, that doesn't happen yet, one of the programs at the university offered a small grant program, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it later, but our interests fit that program, and Tonia had this brainchild that she wanted to really try to fund and see if we could see how it worked, and so that's what we wound up doing.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm Tonia Brinston. Just want to reiterate what Sharon said. I do have dual roles at Extension. I'm in SNAP Ed and I'm also in financial capability. SLAP is my business, and so I'm the community partner that we collaborated with on this grant. And as you know, we're from the Minnesota area. We're from Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered. And so in conjunction with that, and in the context of the pandemic and the civil uprising across our country, I decided I wanted to, be deliberate in bringing financial education to the community. There's a fully functional myth that African Americans cannot create wealth because of their consumerism. And as we all know, the systems, processes, and procedures that have been historically in place is what has kept African Americans, from building wealth. And so I wanted to create this project to address ambiguous loss, historical trauma, and financial well-being for the community members in North Minneapolis. So my idea, from the lived experience and the historical trauma impacts of African Americans' decision making, particularly interested how it affects financial wellness. The racial covenants, and I think Dr. Watson mentioned last night about the redlining. There was research around eviction. Our area code 55412 has the highest eviction rates in the state of Minnesota, and so just wanted to bring some of this knowledge to our community members and let them know that they are not in the financial position that they are solely as their own fault, but those systems, processes, and procedures. People tend to take on all the responsibility for the financial situations and often blame themselves. So, but in reality, we know that's not why most brown and black individuals are unable to build wealth. And so that's my hypothesis. And the historical trauma piece of it came from this amazing person, Manu, sitting next to me. You're up next.
Oh, it's me already?
Yes.
We just 5 minutes.
Yes.
So as a community member of North Minneapolis, I think I came to this project a couple different ways. One, fortunately, in the end of 2019, I actually acquired a position with Extension that was the neighborhood nutrition educator. I never heard of it before, but I knew that the concept and even the information would add value to my community, the information and the education. But unfortunately, I received a fellowship which couldn't do the job because I had a fellowship, and my fellowship was basically around where my passion is, which is lifestyle change, lifestyle recovery. So when Tonia asked me, was I interested, I instantly thought of the historical context of, well, not just money, but capitalism. And then I also came up with the older concept of barter and trade. So I literally spoke on the historical context of barter and trade and how, and we would say through the course of humanity, barter and trade has favored us very well in a lot of different instances, but in some places the barter and trade system doesn't work for everyone. Like if you have wood and I have apples and we trade, the apples will go bad before the wood, right? So it has its plus and minuses. And in seeing, coming back to the historical context of not only the barter and trade system, but also capitalism, I understood that a lot of individuals in our community had a unhealthy relationship with money, right? Or even the mentality or the wealth mentality versus the poverty mentality. So in talking about the historical context and the pros and cons, I think the conversation came up around, capitalists and the capitalist system, but then that took us back to another historical context because capitalism didn't just start in the United States. Capitalism was formulated, I think, like the 15th to 16th century, but it was primarily to, and I want to say to accumulate capital and in large productive capabilities, right? Production capabilities to produce, right? So in having this conversation with individuals around the historical context, that kind of brings us up to speed on a lot of individuals' mindsets. So I'm happen to be 52 years young, right? So I made it through successfully, made it through the crack era, and a lot of individuals who were caught up in the inner cities and the systems that revolved around the crack era. There was not so much education put on the value of money or the value of property, but just getting it, right? And a lot of people had the mentality that does come from and I want to say a poverty mindset where we think that we need so much and not really understand that we was given so much to be able to make us or help us to be successful. So in the conversation about capitalism, the question was brought up: when did capitalism like really start in America, in the United States? And we know that capitalism really came with the first slave ships. The ideology that there was going to be cargo that could be capitalized off of for gain, right? And from that capitalist system, because the capitalist system already existed, from that style of capitalism, a lot of black and brown people, families were destroyed, right? A lot of people were broken, and a lot of dreams and abilities to succeed was really diminished. So I think that it was a very good conversation, right, around the difference between bartering and trading, actually taking what we was giving as human beings to benefit us and working with each other. Um, and one of the things about barter and trade that there was no concentration of like power and wealth because everyone could provide for themselves according to their means. So the conversation itself um, really put the emphasis on how, and it has been sustained, but how the poverty mind sustains itself and also how the wealthy mind sustains itself based on the interactions with each other. So I think that, and at the end, that is a saying by Noble Milton Freeman that an overview of capitalism here in the United States and its efforts. There is one and only one social responsibility of business to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. And I laughed too. So that was the real overview and the educational part of what we have to offer, and especially to our community. Individuals really understand that most of our talents, abilities, gifts, and skills make a way for us, right? And when you have individuals who struggle with a poverty mindset, we push the idea that you have everything that you need to be successful.
I would just like to add that the participants, when Manu presented this part, the participants, I was really surprised at, you could see the lights coming on, the aha moments. Oh, now this makes sense, because they didn't have that knowledge. You know, that poverty mindset, you know, they're not studying history. They're just trying to figure out how they're going to put food on the table. But they were really receptive to this information, and those aha, you could just see it in their faces, and they started asking questions. And I was really, I was happy to see that, because it made me aware that this was working. It was doing what we intended for it to do.
Ready to move on?
It's your turn.
All right. Okay. I'm just gonna. Okay. I just wanted to put in a little side note here about Extension's role in the project, since we're all mostly employed by Extension. So I was the representative of Extension on this project, but I didn't have anything to do with development of the education or delivery of information, or I actually wasn't even in the room. It was something that was Tonia thought it when her idea was developed. She was like, we want it to be a space that's really just black and brown people, and we can really be real with one another and not have to worry about how what we're saying is going to be perceived by anyone else. So I really was working as an extension educator to help facilitate the project. So I kind of was like almost like a project manager or something. You know, I tried to help make sure there were supplies available and we had spaces available, and we helped with IRB and delivery of or dissemination of flyers and communication, and then now things like writing proposals to present, and we're working on an article. Those parts of things I'm more involved in, but not the actual program development and delivery, which is new for those of us at U of M Extension. Okay. I guess I'll go on to say, much like the doctor, is it Dr. Watkins, Naima Watkins, was saying last night, we experienced a really, really similar dynamic in Minnesota between the university and the community, particularly North Minneapolis, where UROC, our office, is located. There's been a long history of exploitation on the part of the university with the people in the community, and so now when we you know, as representatives of the U come in and say, hey, we want to work with you, there's a lot of speculation, and people don't automatically say, oh yeah, that sounds great. So this is another project that we're hoping will begin to develop a better, more trusting and beneficial relationship for all of us. And we hope to keep moving forward in this way. So just quickly, this was our research team. Tonia was one of the PIs, and then just the requirements of the grant meant that one of the PIs had to be a tenure-line professor. So our colleague Shalandra Bryant agreed to do that. She had just been working for the university for like 1 week when we approached her. Total. I mean, she is literally a star. She's like very famous in her circle, but she's also just a star of a person that she was so on board to do it. She worked with us really, and she didn't do this project in name only. She really agreed to be the PI, and then she worked really hard to make it meaningful for all of us. So we're so lucky that she was there. There's me. I'm sorry, it's too old of a picture. I look like one of those people that won't admit they're aging and put up their but anyways, that's all I have right now. And then our colleague who's also an extension specialist, Joyce Cerrito, was part of the project, and then our Tonia is my supervisor, our program leader, Mary Jo Cummings. So that's who else there. But Shalandra and Tonia were really the movers and the shakers. Okay. Now
Is that me?
I don't know, these slides are kind of out of order.
Okay. So our this is just a project overview. Our research question was, does community-based trauma-informed financial education improve the well-being of African American families? By providing education about and openly discussing the social, physical, and financial traumas experienced by African Americans, we hope to alleviate the shame and self-blame for financial stagnation. That will in turn relieve stress, which we hypothesize will improve their ability to make better decisions. As stress negatively impacts cognitive abilities, component 2 involves providing financial education, which we hypothesize will also contribute to improved financial decision making, but we will first address the trauma. And so the significance of the research question: currently, African Americans account for 13% of the U.S. population and significantly impact the economy with $1.2 trillion in purchases annually. And this is from the Black Enterprise 2019 article. The fully functional yet reoccurring myth that I say this in my sleep. Black buying power continues its assault on logic by working to convince poor that they are poor because of high consumerism, lack of fundamental financial knowledge, and poor work ethic. And consequently, the myth shifts blame from those who create these deficiencies onto those who suffer from them. And so these systems create financial disparities, wealth gaps, historical trauma that possibly explain why 30% of African Americans are convinced the American dream may be fading away.
Okay, so these are the elements of our project. We had our research team that we showed you the pictures of, and then it was a requirement of the grant, and we also thought it was super important to involve the community heavily in the project development. And so we created what was called a community-led advisory group, or CLA, and we invited members of the community, including Manu, to participate in the development and just priorities, the way the financial education classes were going to look, everything. We asked them how to recruit. We really asked for their input in a lot of different ways. And because we did ask for such a large amount of input from them, we thought it was only fair to reimburse them. So we paid each of them to be a member of the community-led advisory group. We asked them to meet with us 6 times for 6 1.5-hour sessions, basically. And so that part was super. I'll show you a picture in a minute, but it was super fun to have that. And we all, because it was height of the pandemic, we only met on Zoom and all of that kind of stuff. Community trainings was another aspect of the project that we wanted to bring the message of historical trauma's effects upon financial decision making to the entire community, not just people who participated in the classes. And actually, that is something we were not able to achieve yet. Hopefully, we're going to be able to do it. We had a hard time finding a speaker because they were so in demand. It's really hard to get someone who had the time and availability to do this for us. So that part we put on hold.
There was a lot of healing going on in our community at that time because it was right around the civil unrest in George Floyd's murder. So everybody was busy doing healing sessions in other areas of the community.
And the final element is a 5-class series that was developed by Tonia that is about financial capability and decision making. 4 of the classes are primarily about financial capability, but we began with the class that Manu led on historical trauma and the effects that has upon decision making in general. Here's our team. Here's our CLA team in various forms. And Manu and the woman next to him in the picture, Portia Jackson, were also speakers. Manu led the first class, but Portia also was an expert who came in to talk about home ownership as one of the classes. And we recruited our group from the North Side community. So the North Side community is North Minneapolis, basically. So, primarily African American, I would say. Would you all say? There's a strong African American community there, and so that is where we wanted to target our audience.
And we also fed the participants every class because it was a Saturday, and people don't want to come sit in a workshop on a Saturday, but we also compensated the participants as well financially. Was it gift cards that we gave them?
Yep.
Yep, we gave them gift cards.
Yep. So, this is back to the CLA. There's a role of the CLA. They consulted, like I said, on every aspect of the project, and it was a wonderful chance for me to get to know a few more people and to also continue to work with some of my community partners in addition to those who I had not met. So it was great.
So this is us doing our workshops. There was some youth. The average age was 25, but we were focusing on families, not just the adults, because I think it's important that our youth get this knowledge as much as the adults. And so there were a couple of teenagers in the class with us, and that was really fun. It was fun. And so we completed, I did financial education around budgeting. Creating spending plans, the importance of managing a healthy credit score, what that looks like, how to do that. We build vision boards. Everybody, what's your vision for the future, and how can you get there? We talked about student loans and the importance of determining whether that's a good fit for you or whether a trade would be more beneficial. And then Portia did home ownership, and then Manu did the historical trauma. But Dr. Shalondra Bryant also came in and talked about ambiguous loss, and there's 2 parts to that. One is the Alzheimer's, when there's the spouse in the home that may get Alzheimer's, and they kind of check out from the other family because of that right there. But then say one of the adults or spouses in the home loses their job, they kind of check out from the family, it's that shame and that stigma. And so those are the 2 ambiguous loss that we talked about. Well, Dr. Shalondra Bryant had talked about. And we, again, each participant got $100 for participating in this. And I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. And now we're going to share just a little bit of the preliminary findings with all of you. So this
should be the relationship status one.
I really don't know why these are hopping around like this. It had to do with me, I guess, because I uploaded them, but I don't. We can just go ahead to this one about the physical health. Well, you can tell it if you want. Our slide's about the relationship status.
So these are the questions that we asked the community members. How would you rate your overall physical health? And the average score was 3.29. And I think we were on a scale of 1 to 5, right? Because these are all over the place here. And then how would you rate your overall mental health? Keeping in mind we were in the middle of the pandemic, the civil unrest, and the murder of George Floyd at the time, and so our participants, they were really struggling with some stuff. Again, we're working with marginalized, underserved community, African American families, and so I think these numbers really speak for themselves, especially around their stress level. The average score for the stress was like 7.71. And so that's how we measured where they were at that point.
So their physical health was pretty good, they said,
Mhm.
between good and very good. But then the next slide, yay.
Yep,
How would you rate your overall mental health?
get that one.
Not as good. Things were down at that point. And that was just kind of understandable, but
Oh, the average age range was 21.
so then we asked them about how much stress you felt over the past month.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, the stress measure. Some people they were experiencing a great deal of stress. I think we all were at that time, and we did this in person. And so we did it in a big room. We did our social distancing, but I think it was important that we did this in person. For me, I think it's easier the delivery of the message is easier in person versus Zoom, especially when that human interaction, fun games and activities, and breaking bread together. And so we did do this in person. I just remembered that in the middle of the pandemic and everything. I just thought it was important that we do this in person. Um, do you have the relationship status slide?
I don't know what happened to it. I'm sorry. You can tell them. Tell them what it says there.
So the demographic data from our sample, the relationship status for program participants, 2 people answered the question that no income, 29% of the people. 2 people had no income. 1 person was making between 1,000 to 499, not thousand, $4,999. And then 1 person was making 10,000 to 14,999, and 1 person was 15,000 to 19,999. And then there was one that was in the salary range of 35,000 to $40,000. And so 71% of the participants were single or never married. 0 were separated, divorced, or widowed. 0 were married and living with a partner. 14% was married but not living with partner. And 14% was seriously dating someone. Right. So those are seriously dating. I mean, going out to eat dating.
What more commitment do you want?
Wonder.
Right. Okay. And then Sharon, the next one is you with the results.
Yeah.
Sometimes often.
Yeah. So just to say still on this slide, how much stress have you felt over the past month? Again, the average score is pretty high. Up there at 7.71. That's going toward the a lot side of this scale.
Yeah, the range was 5 to 10. So the average score was 7, almost 8%.
And then again, Shalandra, our colleague and one of the PIs, is one of her areas of expertise is ambiguous loss and stress, family stress. So she asked some questions about, but she brought in these stress questions. And so the interesting sort of stuff to point out is that over there on the left, the question is, how often do you feel as though you're invisible or ignored in society? And the average response was sometimes. So sometimes people felt that way. And then she asked, how often do you feel as though your voice is not heard in society? And the average response was often. And then again, she asked, how often do you feel as though you are watched too much in society? And the average response was sometimes.
Oh, that conversation stirred because they were talking about when they go into a store, they feel like they're constantly being watched versus their white counterparts. We had a really nice conversation about that one, especially with the youth. Yeah.
And then the final question she asked is, when you are stressed out, how often do you tend to emotionally withdraw from the people you love? And the average response was often. So you can imagine in a family, if you're feeling really stressed and your response to that is to withdraw, it's hard to make decisions together because you're feeling so stressed, basically. And then Shalandra went on to ask, due to past experience of discrimination, how often have you been bothered by any of the following? And I'm sorry, the script is, or the font is really small, but she has a lot of answers that people could choose. And the one that was answered the most commonly was in yellow down there. I often become easily annoyed or irritable. So that's another aspect of family relationships that's going to be more difficult during a stressful time. You're not only feeling like withdrawing, but you're also feeling more annoyed and more irritable. So it's hard to work things out together. These are great examples of how trauma is affecting decision making for families. Then, this was a big qualitative question that Shalandra asked about when people feel stress. They sometimes feel that they are not able to provide financially for their family, or when they feel that they sometimes feel stressed when they're not able to provide financially for their family, or when they feel that they are not able to protect their family. And both of these things were coming into play for many of the families. That type of stress makes some people emotionally withdraw from their loved ones. Have you ever felt as though you were emotionally or psychologically withdrawing from your family? And think about a time you may have felt this way. So that's the thing she asked, and people would either write it out in a paragraph or maybe talk with her about it. But the families didn't want us to share that information. But just so you know, we did ask that. Okay. And then finally, about emotional withdrawal, we asked them about the things that make you feel like emotionally withdrawing. So 5 people said they withdraw from their family when they worry about financial strain and providing for their family. 5 people indicated that they withdraw when they worry about keeping their family safe and protecting their family. And of all the items, those were the 2 things that had the biggest emotional effect on people. So worrying about financial strain, which is what Tonia teaches about all the time, and worrying about keeping their family safe, which has been an ongoing issue for us in Minneapolis now for a long time, but certainly since the pandemic began. And then the second most commonly answered thing is that 4 people indicated that social injustices and unfair things tend to make them withdraw from their loved ones. So our goal when we're working with families is we want families to thrive and not just survive. So that's why we're trying to develop projects like this and figure out even more effective ways that we can support families and allow them to thrive. Okay, benefits of the project.
So the benefits of the project, I'm real passionate about financial education. I've walked my own walk in conquering debt and wealth building, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with Tupac, but he has a saying in one of his songs, and I always say it, and my kids like, Mom, you sound like Tupac. I used to be a poor single mother on welfare, and it was generational, and I decided I didn't want to be on that system for the rest of my life. So when I became an empty nester, that's when I started deciding which direction I wanted to go. And so I used the system as a stepping stone, and so I'm real passionate about sharing it and paying it forward in my community. Um, my mission is to interrupt generational poverty through financial education, and so that's and minimize the shame and stigma that's associated with personal finances. And so that's one of the benefits of the project, and to build community relationship and develop tools and resources for community members to build generational wealth, and then that ongoing relationship building and trust. Like Sharon said in the beginning, there are some people on the fence when it comes to working with the University of Minnesota in the community. There are some people that embrace us, but then there's some that are like, why now? You've been here all this time. You haven't, And so my role and my primary role, I feel like, is to bridge that gap. And let me tell you, it's not an easy task. Some people don't even answer the door when I ring the bell. Others is like, come on in, so that's one of the benefits of the project. And I'm hoping, to keep building on this and just keep engaging more community members and keep this one right here in the loop on this because he's got some power. He's powerful. He's powerful.
It's one of those ones that's tricky to get because it's so sought after these
Right.
days. You go ahead.
So the plan going forward is, present more around the historical trauma for the community, offer financial coaching and mentoring for other participants, and again, just keep building on what we already started here. And that's it.
Yeah. Questions? Oh, sure. I think I saw your hand go up first.
My question was, what's the size of your participants? Like, how many people participated in the advisory group, but also also the group of people who participated in the program?
We had 7 or 8 of us on, will include myself, on the advisory group.
I'm going to go back to the picture of them. There they are.
Yeah, that's the whole advisory group right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, 8 of us. And so we were real strategic in who we invited to be a part of this because we wanted people that were in the community doing the work and community members were familiar with. And then they helped us build out the application process and how are we going to get community members in. So we decided each one of us reached out to directors and program coordinators of organizations in the community that we're familiar with, saying, hey, we're doing this project. Are there any, can you identify any of your participants you think would be a good fit for it? And then just word of mouth. We didn't really, because the grant wasn't a very large grant, we didn't want to put it out on social media, but somebody did. Because I got an email from someone saying, hey, I seen this on Facebook, and I started getting a flurry of them. I don't know who did it, but I'm just glad they did, because now, it's out there, so we're going to build on that. And in terms of how many people, was it 7 families?
Mm-hmm.
Our goal was 25, but again, in the middle of the pandemic, the lack of trust at the University of Minnesota, everybody knows Tonia with the white glasses, but still it's the University of Minnesota, so we had that challenge as well.
And it was really, like, we were new to coming back in person,
Mm-hmm.
and I think people were just feeling a little nervous about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say about the CLA, in terms of the numbers, one thing I was learning about that is if you want to make a lot of decisions with a group, it can't be too big because then it's just so much harder to come to a decision. So that's something that I learned to keep in mind as well.
Did you have your hand?
I did, but I think I thought of 5 extra questions after that. But you did say, so hi, and I'm also, we met yesterday from Minnesota as well in youth development. So, hi Sharon. I don't think I've seen Sharon in person since.
The first time.
Oh my Zoom. Okay, so you said to build on, right? This was, what do you envision how you can build on this?
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine there's still some trust cultivating and of course resources attaining that needs to happen to build on it. But what's your dream and vision for moving forward?
My dream is to get a grant big enough to do it on a larger scale and be able to compensate. Because one thing about doing these type of workshops, people come when there's food and they come when there's money involved. But then they're also there for a reason, to obtain the knowledge, to build out, their portfolio in terms of financial wealth. And I always tell people your net worth is your net worth. And so it's an opportunity to build on. And then we also offer them the opportunity to follow up for a one-to-one. So let's say someone has never seen their credit report before. We give them the tools on how to obtain that, but then if they don't know how to read it, they can call and say, hey, Tonia, can you help me with this? And work it from there. Just want them to know that we're there no matter how big or small, because to me there is no such thing as a dumb question, especially when you come to your finances. And that just reminded me, another thing that I'm really passionate about is the language used in financial products. I mean, it levels the playing field for those that have the knowledge, but and then those that don't. I think that's very important because the terms around financial products, if you explain it to, I mean, you and I may understand it, but when we're talking about a underserved family that's making $20,000, $30,000, they're swimming in debt, they just, are having those challenges, and to say go into a financial institution, apply for a loan, and have no clue. And so I think that language is important, and that's a whole nother ball of wax because I'd like to see the financial institutions held accountable to ensuring community members have access to the capital, but also that language, make them understand it in the way they can, make them explain it in the way they can understand it. Yes,
So
ma'am?
that was actually a question I was just thinking of asking you, Tonia, but if you've reached out to the local banking community to become a partner, I know in Florida that we do the Money Mentors program, and part of the Money Mentors program is to engage some of those individuals, like you just do the follow-on service, but
Right.
have you thought about approaching maybe just a couple of them, even in sponsorship if you would, because they also, I think, to some extent want to engage the community, but don't know how to engage the community. Because that service, I mean, every time you open a savings account, a credit card, those individuals at the bank get like bonuses because that's how their system is structured for them to be paid, if you would. So I wondered if you had kind of navigated that or thought about navigating that path going forward.
Absolutely. We just got our first black-owned bank opened up, about 2 weeks ago, about a month ago, maybe?
From Michigan, actually.
Yeah, and so thinking about, I am anticipating, I want to give them a chance to get open and get flowing and reach out to them. And I am a stickler for acronyms, and so I also would like to see the financial institutions, instead of giving somebody a stamp of denial, give them a plan, and that's preparation for a loan to build assets and create assets to build their net worth. And so I'm hoping that's what they're going to do. Why don't how come I don't qualify? Here's why you don't qualify. Here's where there's room for improvement, but here's a resource to help you get there. So I'm definitely going to be reaching out. Yes, ma'am?
May I add actually 2 goals I have based on this project?
Go for it.
Okay, well, one is to create something that is a shareable product of this that people could take and use, about the effect of historical trauma on financial decision making, so other people could teach it if they wanted to. I would love to do that. The second thing is, like Tonia, I want to get a big enough grant that we have a coworker who has brought forth the question and is really, Tonia's working on this too, moving forward this issue of seeing racism as a public health issue. And I personally really want to try to find a big enough grant that we can focus on that multi-year and really seriously, use that grant to make some good positive change. Okay, sorry, back to you.
So can you talk a little bit more about the structure of how the program that you developed works, like how many sessions, and kind of like sharing a little bit of your experience of the challenges, if you will, because you said our goal was 25 families, we ended up serving 7 families, but can you talk a little bit about out of whatever series, or how many series you had, how many actually the 7 families attended? Can you talk a bit about the barriers? And then based on that too, when you provided food and as some sort of compensation, even though it came from a grant, did you have some barriers too from extension saying, okay, we have programs like that, but we don't provide that? Like, why do we, did you have those conversations with people questioning some of that? Or not, or can you talk more a little bit about? I know that was 3 things in one, but
well, because the grant wasn't as large as we had hoped for it to be, we knew up front how much it was, and so in the RFP we kind of did a budgeting narrative because initially we were going to offer what's the devices?
Oh yeah,
Chromebooks or iPads.
Well, whatever, a tablet.
Right. So we were going to do that if there was a need for a family. We also created a workbook with instructions on how to do, that's the workbook right there with instructions on, walking through your credit. We had a mock budget in there. We had a real budget in there. Yep, we had SMART goals in there. And then there's an African American woman, I can't call her name right now. She created journals, they sell them in Targets. And so we were deliberate in supporting other African American organizations for, those type of materials there. And what was your other part of the question?
The issue around food, if we could pay for it or not pay for it.
So the other part of the question is like, how many sessions do you have, and how many, like, out of the 7 families came to all the sessions you had?
We had a total of 5. Because well, actually we had 6. Well, no, we had 7. Because I split it was actually a total of 5 sessions, but I split one of my sessions with Portia that did the homeownership. And then Dr. Shalandra Bryant did the ambiguous loss, and she talked about student loans. And then Manu did the historical trauma. So I did budgeting to create savings, debt reduction, and asset building, how to improve your credit score. And then we talked about some fraud and identity theft because it's running rampant. And they were not knowledgeable around that. They could freeze their credit reports. And now with the new laws, even parents can freeze their teens up to 16-year-olds credit report. And so just ensuring that they had that type of knowledge. So we did 5 sessions. I think one of the challenges, again, with acquiring the 25 people, one with the pandemic, so I think a lot of programs were having challenges with their participants participating because, people just started dispersing. We had the toilet paper, the sanitizer. I mean, everything was, people started hoarding and they were just focusing on this COVID. And so I think that was one of the challenges. And again, that lack of trust with the University of Minnesota. And so that's how we were able to use those additional funds that we had planned for the 25, but only 7. And transportation was an issue for some. And so our fearless leader over here went and picked one of the participants up and dropped her off. We just wanted to make sure they got there. If we had to go pick them up, we'd go pick them up and bring them to the program.
I mean, my experience is in general, nobody's busting down the doors to do financial management classes anyways.
Right.
They're expecting to have a finger shaking at them, saying, here's what you're doing wrong. And so I feel like it was great that we got what we did. And we were using it as kind of a pilot project a little bit to see how we could disseminate.
Did you say that you were, the grant total was, you applied for 25,000 and got 7? Why did you, I just didn't get a number.
No, our goal was 25 families,
okay,
or
cool.
20 families, I think it was, and we got 7.
What was the funding like? How much did you get for this project?
15,000.
15,000. So I just wanted.
Who was it from? Who's funding?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was the sweet
from the
deal.
University of Minnesota. Right?
Yeah, but it was from this special program it's called UROC, University Research Outreach and Engagement Center, which has multi-pronged approach to working in the community. So Tonia and I both office there actually, and Manu's in and out of there all the time for community meetings. And we know the people who are so they also though are a programmatic staff, and so they get money that they can then do these micro grants every year. So we knew the people who were sending out the money, and so it was a great connection.
So it's a great program. I never heard of anything like this in particular. It's certainly financial planning is within the purview of extension, but just I've never heard it about it adapted in this way. And I want to kind of like see if we can think about like following the money trail a little bit that allowed you to do it, because you had said, I think in the initial, in order to apply, you needed that faculty member to be a PI, and looking between the lines, it's like, well, you would be happy if just she put her name on it, but then she actually became involved, and I understand that a lot, because when you're on the research side, certain opportunities are open to you that may or may not be open to you on the extension side. And
right.
I would imagine one of the reasons why you could pay people is because there was a research project, and it's typical to compensate people for participating in research. But the outreach and extension part was fully baked into it, and it was almost like, you got the research in there as a way to qualify for the grant, and as a way to maybe ask some questions and learn about the community. And so I'm kind of not asking a question so much as I want folks to notice where the power structure still exists at a place like the University of Minnesota, and the woman who you claimed as a star could probably make the decision to be on this because she was a star, not an up-and-coming professor who needed to figure out her way to get tenure within her department. So we got a lot of things come together in order to make that happen. And it sounded like it was a great experience, and I hope you guys can continue to expand it, but that in some ways you are able to circumvent the things that make this kind of work difficult within the university.
Yes, like just the question about food. I'm not in the health and nutrition side of things, but I know it's a, Tonya, it's a big pain, right? To serve food at something. For some reason, there's a big rule you can't use the money to buy food or whatever. But we didn't have anything. We didn't have any restrictions on our money. We could use it however we saw fit. I mean, we had to say what we were going to do in the proposal, but that was really helpful. And I would say what you're saying is a great example of the power of relationships. Tonya called on many people like Manu in the community that are these experts that aren't necessarily always known about by people in the university, and so it was a great opportunity for innovation, I feel like.
The gentleman in the back.
Excuse me, Kathy Lewis from Rochester, New York, Blocks and Rules program. So, we developed a similar program, and not the emphasis on financial education, but on community building, looking at other programs. But I'm really interested in seeing where this program goes in the next 5 years, because it seems like there are incredible opportunities in terms of sustainability, really partnering with institutions that already have the audience, adult education programs, churches. I'm sure you've thought of all of these and more to really utilize the approach and the curriculum you've developed, but it just seems really great. And sustainability is the key challenge, right?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you for teasing out that basically leveraging of resources, right, from this institution or from the extension to be able to, right, use the power resources network to work with. I think what's integral in this component is NAMU and working with consultants and working with grassroots organizations. And so that's something that, my name is Julio Contreras. I'm with the University of California Cooperative Extension in the San Francisco Bay Area in Alameda County. So we got like Oakland and then also like Richmond and like, all these dope areas that are like really popping with the way that they're communicating and the way that they're building relationships with the county, with the cities, and basically just really trying to develop that kind of leveraging of resources. And so I think something that I have two questions. I guess I'll go with the first, like quick and easy one. Just thinking about mental health stigma, especially for males and especially for Black and brown males. I was wondering when those questions were asked, because I think I found it really interesting that you were talking about, keeping these spaces as like really comfortable and right. And so yeah, that's my first question.
Those were up front, right?
Yep.
Those were at the very beginning.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any males participate. I wish they, again, perennial kind of question for the work I do. Trickier.
Yeah, and then so just really quick, sorry, I don't want to take up too much time, but my second point is kind of leaning more into how we can make this happen more. But then I think something that I find really interesting that I'm still breaking down with working with Extension is just dealing with, just institutions here in the United States, right, that still haven't acknowledged and fully unpacked land grab, right, history of genocide, and then the history of also capitalizing off of slavery. Some universities like Yale and others are starting to kind of really tease that out, and then talking about reparations, like being really real about how they were able to get to where they were. But the other component that I think is oftentimes lost, and is oftentimes lost intentionally because of the way that the power structure is currently organized and works. Namu, you talked about means of production. You talked about, right, the control at the local level, the control of the families who are, putting in the labor, who are producing from the environment. And then you have that switch with with especially like in Europe and the colonialism, right, of extracting, and I think a piece that is lost oftentimes is not just extracting of resources and destroying cultures, destroying languages. We had that replication here in the United States, where right, you have assimilation of the native population, and also you have the destruction of African cultures, right, languages. But just it's so fascinating how these groups and how our people have been able to still come through the slave ships with seeds in their heads, right? Be able to grow their own food in these environments, and really slave masters were dependent on specific. This is something that I recently heard from Professor or Reverend Dr. Carter. The slave masters actually sought out specific areas in Africa so that those tribes, the Africans from those tribes, can grow the specific crop that they needed. And so this is oftentimes information and knowledge that isn't communicated, and it's not communicated because the colonizer doesn't want those that they're oppressing and those that they're dominating to be able to use these tools. And so I could go on and on. What I wanna like phrase and what I wanna really challenge y'all with is basically trying to also think about the American ideology, right? Thinking like throwing in neoliberalism, throwing in religion, throwing in culture, being egocentric, individualism, because of you talking about the trauma. I think that's a really big piece. And how do we build wealth that isn't so like individually led? We need to, because we're in this capitalist society, right? But how do we not use the same master tools and the same ideologies? And right, we need to really learn from indigenous knowledge. We need to really look at different kinds of ways around the world of building economic, social, cultural, and really environmental. Obviously, like environment is like really big and a really big component to this. But basically, going back to thinking about different ways of structuring the way we communicate, the way we treat one another, the way we barter and trade, the way we exchange resources, and so that's something that I'm seeing like with this program and with this project that would be really fascinating is building local, like for example, I work a lot with like food system, food sovereignty, right? Land rematriation and land sovereignty, a lot of the groups that we're working with in the Bay Area. And so how to basically integrate a lot more of that. But then you have the extension and university issue of wanting to take ownership over everything that is produced. And so that's something that I'm struggling with, is that how do we, yeah, so sorry.
No, thank you. I love your passion, and I agree with you about everything. So we have a big job ahead of us.
Your 10 years.
Quick and less passionate, nerdy question. Was your stress indicators, are those already valid instruments, or can you speak to that?
They're actually Shalandras, and they are valid. I'm certain. And if you want to know more about them, I can connect you to.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah. Oh my goodness! I don't want to be the decision maker.
Was it a tie? Was it?
Yeah, it was
two? There's just two.
yeah,
We
just
can
two.
handle.
All right. Manu, I want to go back. You mentioned at the very beginning the barter and trade, and I'm wondering if you're going to continue to evolve that into some community-based maker spaces, fix-it cafes, buy nothing days.
Oh, buy nothing day.
Look into that.
Yeah, I'm looking into it now.
Our extension is doing that. They're having fix-it cafes one Saturday a month, and
That's
people come in and you could.
Mhm.
I had my vacuum cleaner fixed. I didn't have to buy another vacuum cleaner.
Mark, we'll hook up with you about hearing how that gets. But anyways, there was one more question, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Tonia. Great.
He wants to connect with
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I have several questions, but I just ask one. How are you going to measure the short and long-term impact of your project?
My hope is that when they call me, like there's been people that come, I'll see them on the street. Hey, Tonia, I came to one of your workshops a while ago. I'm getting ready to buy a house. So that right there is a measurement. But my hope is that in moving the needle. They understand their credit. They understand how to build it. They understand how to manage debt. And so those are some measurements for me, but just people opening up an account, because the majority don't even have an account because they have that shame and stigma because they don't know that language when they go into those financial institutions. And so although I do work for Extension, I have dual roles, I still own SLAP, that's my business, and I have a partnership with Prepare and Prosper, and they have a partnership with Sunrise Bank, and the goal is to get community members banked.
So do you have a plan to follow up with them later?
We don't for this pilot
Not
project.
for this project.
But we would love to have like a 6-month follow-up, year follow-up.
Yeah.
But we don't have that in place right now.
Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah. One more question.
On your partnership with Sunrise Bank, have you had a chance to have a conversation about the Community Reinvestment Act and whether they or other financial institutions they are aware of need some assistance delivering and meeting those requirements? Therefore, looking at a new partnership with financial support to expand your program.
Well,
great idea.
Right. My business is separate from Extension and the University of Minnesota, but Sunrise Bank is part of the Community Reinvestment Act, and that's why they created this. One thing about it, there's no overdraft fees. They don't pull your credit for the bank, and they offer credit building materials for community members. So a lot of community members don't know that there's this system called check systems that exist, and it's like the 3 reporting bureaus, but it's your history with banking. And so just giving them the knowledge around that and just getting them banked.
Right.
Maybe we could get some grant money from the bank, though, through that CRA. That's a great idea.
Yep.
I feel like we have to end. We don't want to keep you hostage. Thanks for all of it.